It was a quiet Los Angeles morning when the first trailers rolled onto stage 12 at Paramount Studios. The sky, a soft pastel hue, bathed the lot in an almost dreamlike light. Outside the soundstage, a few early crew members shuffled across the lot, sipping coffee and dragging equipment. Groggy but focused, the production of Hallowed Ground, a historical action drama about sacrifice and legacy, was finally in motion. Inside, the studio was still being dressed. Massive lights hung like mechanical suns above the set, their matte black casings dangling from thick rigging. Cables slithered across the concrete like snakes, gaffer tape patching down every exposed inch. The scent of sawdust and metal filled the air, the smell of creation, of story being sculpted. At 7:32 a.m., Keanu Reeves arrived. No entourage, no loud entrance. Just a quiet knock on the studio door and a soft greeting to the grip who opened it. "Morning," he said with a slight nod, his voice gravelly but calm. Keanu was dressed in a dark gray hoodie, worn jeans, and sneakers, the kind you wouldn't look at twice if you passed him on the street. A black canvas backpack hung over one shoulder. He moved with the grace of a man both invisible and unmistakable, the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself. He headed straight to the wardrobe trailer, nodding at the security guard and a young PA who was too stunned to say anything back. Inside the makeup area, the stylists greeted him like an old friend. "Keanu, good to see you again." He smiled, warm and present. "Good to be here." By 8:15 a.m., the rest of the cast began to trickle in. Among them was Troy Bennett. Troy wasn't late, but he wasn't early either. His arrival came with engine revs, tire squeals, and the flash of a matte black sports car that seemed engineered to be louder than necessary. The car pulled into a reserved space marked "Executive Producer, Guest." He stepped out like he was arriving at a premiere, not a rehearsal. Troy wore designer sweats, oversized sunglasses, and headphones that weren't connected to anything. His assistant trailed behind him, frantically juggling 2 iced coffees, a protein shake, and a small box of imported almonds. He didn't say hello to anyone, just strutted toward the set with a kind of swagger that was almost impressive in its shamelessness. Some of the crew looked up, others rolled their eyes. Few whispered, "Here we go." Director Sophia Chan, standing near the camera rig, saw him coming. She was a calm force, in her early 40s, hair tied in a loose bun, dressed in black jeans and a gray utility jacket. She had a reputation for crafting emotion from silence, and for knowing exactly when to let a moment breathe. Sophia had worked with difficult actors before, egos, drama, storms in human form, but she had also worked with Keanu. She didn't flinch. "Morning, Troy," she said without warmth or annoyance, just control. Troy barely nodded. "Let's make magic, huh?" Sophia's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's the idea." The cast gathered for a first read. The mood was light but focused. Pages flipping, murmurs of dialogue, nervous laughter from new cast members. Keanu sat at the far end of the table, already in character. His script was marked with notes in soft pencil, corners folded with quiet intent. He wasn't reading, he was listening, to the room, to the rhythm, to the silence between lines. Troy, on the other hand, was performing. Even during a read-through, every line he delivered had a little flourish, an eye squint, a smirk, a faux dramatic pause. He kept glancing around the room to check if anyone was reacting to his brilliance. No one was. After the session, Keanu stood and walked over to the sound engineer. "Mind if I sit in on a few levels?" he asked. "Not at all, man." Keanu put on a pair of headphones, adjusted a mic stand, and listened to how his voice sounded in the playback. He nodded, made a note, and thanked them. "No show. Does care." Troy, meanwhile, complained to the costume designer about how tight his war uniform felt. "You want me to save the world, not get a rash," he quipped. At lunch, most of the crew sat together under the pop-up tents outside. Food trucks lined the lot. Tacos, vegan bowls, a coffee cart. Keanu grabbed a simple black coffee and sat beside the gaffer, talking about the weather, motorbikes, and what movies they were watching. No one recorded it. No one posted about it. But everyone remembered it. Troy took his lunch in his trailer. Lone. He'd ordered special sushi from across town and was already posting a photo of it to his Instagram story with a caption, "Working hard, flexed biceps, living harder, smiling face with sunglasses clapperboard." Back inside, the first camera test was scheduled. Keanu stood patiently on his mark as lights were adjusted, lenses cleaned, flags raised and dropped. He blinked against the brightness but didn't complain. When Troy stepped in, he waved the light tech away. "This lighting's killing my bone structure. Can we get something softer?" Keanu tilted his head, curious. "You're playing a war veteran who's lived in a cave for 5 years," he said. "Bone structure isn't really the focus." Troy smirked. "Just trying to elevate the material, man." There was a pause. Then Keanu smiled. "Sometimes elevation starts with going deeper, not higher." Troy blinked. He didn't reply. But the DP, watching from behind the monitor, whispered, "Damn." By late afternoon, the energy on set had changed. People were watching. Not the scenes, but the space between them. They were watching how Keanu moved, how he treated the interns, how he thanked every department. Makeup, sound, even craft services. He wrote a thank you note to the script supervisor. He picked up a fallen C-stand without being asked. He complimented a lighting choice that no one else noticed. Troy noticed too, but he didn't understand it yet. That wouldn't come until later, much later. As the day wrapped, Sophia gave final notes for tomorrow's rehearsal. "We're blocking the confrontation sequence in the chapel," she said. "Keanu, I know you've done scenes like this before." Keanu held up a hand gently. "But not this one. Every moment is new." The crew smiled. Sophia nodded. Then Troy chimed in, loud enough for the room to hear. "Guess I'll bring the fire tomorrow. Might wake up the dead weight." Laughter from a few assistants. Nervous chuckles. Keanu just looked at him. Well. Then he walked away. Not with anger, not with pride, but with purpose. The way only someone who truly knows who they are can walk away. The next morning, before most of the crew had even arrived, Keanu was already there. He sat alone on set, not in his trailer, not hidden behind a monitor, just sitting, center stage, inside the wooden chapel set they'd built for the key emotional scene. It was unfinished, only half-lit, walls still raw. A stained glass window stood crooked behind him, backlit by the glow of dawn pushing through the ceiling vents. He wasn't running lines, he was just being there. A young lighting assistant, early 20s, nervous, entered and nearly jumped when she saw him. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was." Keanu smiled, his face gentle. "No need to apologize. Want help with anything?" She blinked. You're Keanu Reeves." He chuckled. "Still am. Most days." She laughed awkwardly. "I was just gonna adjust the bounce." "That light's too hard." He stood. "Let's do it." Side by side, they worked for 5 minutes. Not a single word about movies, fame, or cameras. Just light. Just the job. When she left, she whispered to herself, "That was the most human thing I've ever seen." Around 9 a.m., the call sheet buzzed on everyone's phone. They had 3 hours to prep the first full scene rehearsal, a critical turning point in the film where Keanu's character breaks down emotionally after finding his comrade's journal. Troy was late again, but this time people noticed. When he finally arrived, half an hour after the scheduled block, he walked onto set and froze. Something was different. The mood, the way people greeted him. Less warmth, less curiosity, less respect. He noticed Keanu quietly helping a background actor with blocking, someone with only 2 lines in the entire film. He saw Sophia nod approvingly at something Keanu said about using real candles instead of LEDs for authenticity. He watched as grips and camera ops leaned toward Keanu when he spoke, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And for the first time, Troy felt small, Not unimportant, just less. They began blocking the scene. Keanu stood solemn in the center of the chapel, cradling the imaginary journal. He said nothing for the first minute, just moved, eyes tracking the stained glass, breath shallow, was heavy real. No words, but the pain was there. Troy stepped into the scene. His line came fast. "It's just paper, man. He's gone." But Keanu didn't reply. Not because he forgot his line, but because he was in it. Troy broke character. "Cut. Is he even listening?" Sophia raised her hand. "Let it play." Troy frowned. He missed the cue. Keanu looked up slowly. Not angry, not defensive, just real. He wouldn't answer right away, he said softly. He just found the words his friend died writing. Sophia whispered, "Exactly." And suddenly the silence made sense. Troy glanced at the crew. They weren't looking at him. They were watching Keanu. Later that day, in the green room, a small group of PAs gathered by the craft table. One of them whispered, "Did you hear what Troy said yesterday when he thought the mic was off?" Another said, "Yeah, total disrespect." And then, "But did you hear what Keanu whispered back?" They hadn't yet, but that would come. Dun, as golden hour fell across the lot, wrapping the set in a warm orange glow. Sophia asked for one final wide shot before they ended the day. Everyone was tired, feet sore, eyes burning, but Keanu stood ready. No complaints. Troy groaned. "Seriously? One more?" Keanu turned face calm. "Every take is someone's first time watching. Might as well make it count." Troy stared. Something in those words hit. He didn't reply. Just stood next to Keanu as the camera rolled one last time. This time he didn't try to outshine him. He just acted. The sun dipped. The chapel lights dimmed. The crew clapped quietly. Sophia gave her final notes. But long after the camera stopped rolling, the story had already begun. Not the one on the page. The one happening in real life. Between two men. One chasing the spotlight. The other teaching by standing in the shadows. The second day of filming started the way most days do in Hollywood. Quietly chaotic. The sun barely broke the haze over Los Angeles, casting the entire lot in a sleepy golden gray. The production team arrived like clockwork, every department slipping into their rhythm. Costume steamers hissing behind trailers, ADs calling out times on walkie-talkies, and grips lifting steel rigs in the morning silence like a team of invisible giants. Inside stage 12, the chapel set had evolved. Overnight, the art department had transformed it. Now there were candles, real ones, lined up along every wooden beam. The stained glass had been fitted, filtering morning light into soft, scattered colors that danced across the scuffed floorboards. Pew benches, aged props, and an altar stood at the center of it all, framed like a memory no one wanted to forget. At 6:55 a.m., Keanu Reeves walked in carrying 2 coffees. He stopped by the sound booth first. "Got you one," he said to a young woman hunched over a monitor. The sound tech, Grace, barely 25, in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, blinked at him like he just handed her gold. "You remembered." "Of course," he said. "Oat milk, no sugar, right?" She nodded, stunned. Troy Bennett would be 2 hours late. By 7:30 a.m., everyone was wired for the day's rehearsal. It was an emotionally charged scene. The first real confrontation between Keanu's character, Samuel, and Troy's Elias. On paper, the dialogue crackled. Guilt, betrayal, the clash between grief and ego. Keanu, as always, had memorized every beat. Troy hadn't even opened the scene packet until that morning. He was in his trailer, barking orders at his assistant between sips of imported cold brew. "Get someone to steam this jacket. Why is there lint on the collar?" "We're live mic engine 10, sir," said the sound PA outside the door. Yeah. At 8:05 a.m., Troy finally emerged. Shades on, chewing gum, jaw sharp with attitude. Grace rushed to mic him. "Chest clip right?" she asked politely. "Sure, sweetheart. Try not to stab me this time." She flinched but didn't reply. She clipped the tiny lavalier mic to his collar and connected the transmitter under his jacket. Standard. Every actor wore one during full dress rehearsals, partly for direction, mostly for pickup. What Troy didn't know was that his channel was already hot, live, recording, monitored by the full crew. The rehearsal began. Keanu stood in the chapel, cradling a prop Bible like it held the memory of a nation. The scene called for raw restraint, a veteran confronting the man who'd failed his brother. Troy sauntered in, cracking his knuckles. The first few lines went smooth. Then Troy missed a cue. Again. Then delivered a sarcastic line with an eye roll that wasn't in the script. "Cut," said Sophia, gently but firmly. "Let's take it from the top," Keanu offered, voice calm. Troy sighed, loudly. Maybe if someone reacted with energy, this wouldn't feel so dead. A murmur rippled across the room. Keanu said nothing. They reset. Then it happened. During the break between takes, Troy walked past two camera ops and leaned in like he was whispering a joke. What he said wasn't funny. "I swear if I have to carry Reeves through another scene, I'll lose it. Dude moves like molasses. Is anyone even watching him? He's like background furniture." He laughed. The boom op heard it. So did the director. So did the sound team in the control booth, who were recording everything. Grace looked up at the monitor. Her fingers froze. She looked over at Sophia. Sophia's eyes narrowed. Not angry, disappointed. But no one said anything. Not yet. Keanu had heard it too. Not directly, but clearly enough. He didn't react. He just sat on one of the pews, stretching his fingers, adjusting his posture, breathing through the tension. Silence is sometimes louder than rage. The room remained still. The hum of the lighting rigs overhead filled the silence. Keanu didn't ask for justice. He didn't even glance in Troy's direction. He simply sat there, hands loosely clasped, eyes lowered, like a man who'd already survived worse storms. But the crew, they felt it. The disrespect, arrogance, and how gracefully it was being met. Director Sophia walked over and quietly asked Keanu if he was okay to continue. He nodded. "Let's try it again," she said, turning to the crew. They ran the scene again. This time Troy was sharper, ironically fueled by his own smugness. He pushed hard in the performance, yelling too soon, walking too aggressively. But Keanu didn't react to the heat. He let it burn around him. He stayed internal, layered, real. He acted like a man carrying a nation on his back. That's when Troy cracked. During one emotional beat, Keanu delivered a line with such stillness, such sadness, that the whole set went quiet. "You want to rewrite the past. I just want to survive it." Troy broke character, visibly. He blinked, as if hit in the chest by something invisible. Everyone saw it. He wasn't acting anymore. He was reacting. After the take, the room held its breath. Sophia stood up slowly and said only one word, "Print." That meant she was keeping it. Back in the sound booth, Grace hit stop on the recorder. The file was labeled Scene 22C. Mic full take. But instead of deleting the pre-roll like usual, she clicked back 10 seconds, then 20, then 30. She heard it. "He's like background furniture." She clicked again, rewound further. "Does anyone even watch this guy?" She swallowed. And then she heard something else, buried in the layers. A whisper, from Keanu's mic, soft. Just one sentence. "You don't earn silence by shouting, Troy." It wasn't said in anger. It was kind, but final. And Grace felt goosebumps run up her arms. She replayed it again. "You don't earn silence by shouting, Troy." It was the kind of line that didn't just belong in a script. It became the story. By lunchtime, the quote had already made its way around set. Crew whispered it over burritos. Lighting guys repeated it like gospel. A costume intern wrote it down on a napkin and slipped it into her notebook. And Troy knew they'd heard something. He just didn't know how much. In the next rehearsal block, he was different. Not humble, not yet, but quieter. He stopped interrupting. He started asking questions. He actually watched Keanu. And for the first time, when Keanu offered a small suggestion on blocking, Troy didn't argue. He just nodded. Later that day, Sophia gathered the lead actors privately in her office above the set. The room was small, dusty, with movie posters from her past films framed on the walls. Keanu leaned against a shelf filled with storyboards. Troy sat stiffly across from her. She played the raw audio back. First, Troy's insult. He flinched. And Keanu's whisper. "You don't earn silence by shouting, Troy." No one said anything for several seconds. Then Sophia looked up. "Do you know why that hit harder than anything in your performance today, Troy?" He shook his head. "Because it was real, honest, and it wasn't even meant for the camera." Troy swallowed hard. "I didn't know the mic was on." Keanu raised an eyebrow slightly. "They're always on." Troy looked down. "Wasn't trying to be a jerk. I just thought you had something to prove," Keanu said gently. Troy nodded. Keanu leaned in a little. "You do. But not by burning someone else's stage." Troy stayed seated in silence. He had no clever comeback this time. No forced smirk. No hollow joke. Just a long, uneasy stillness as the weight of his words echoed back at him through studio speakers. Sophia tapped her pen lightly on her notepad, then set it down. "I don't need perfect," she said, "but I do need real. You've got a chance to be brilliant in this film, Troy, but it starts with shutting up and showing up, not with being louder, not with pretending you're the sun." She turned to Keanu. "Thank you for your patience." Keanu offered a small, warm nod. "We're all learning." Troy looked up at that, surprised by the lack of ego in Keanu's voice. There was no "I told you so," no moral high ground, just stillness and clarity. And that somehow stung more than any insult could have. They left the office together. Back on set, the air felt different, more watchful. The entire crew had felt the emotional storm brewing beneath the surface for 2 days straight. And now, there was rain, cleansing rain. That afternoon, during take 3 of the confrontation scene, something clicked. For the first time, Troy didn't rush. He breathed. He listened. He waited for Keanu's eyes to rise before delivering his line. And when they did, something unspoken passed between them. Tension, yes, but also respect. When the scene ended, there was no applause. No cheers. Just a long pause. Then Sophia, from behind the monitor, said, "Gentlemen, we found it." After wrap, most of the cast headed out to the food trucks or their trailers, but Troy stayed behind. He stood by the camera carts, staring at nothing. Keanu walked by, heading toward the lot exit, motorcycle helmet under one arm. He paused. "You good?" Troy turned, caught off guard. "Yeah, just thinking." Keanu smiled softly. "That's usually where change starts." Troy laughed, but it was hollow. "You know, I didn't come here to be the villain." "I know," Keanu said. "No one does." Long pause. Then Troy asked, "Why didn't you call me out?" "In front of everyone." Keanu shrugged. "Public shaming's cheap. Real correction happens quietly." Troy looked down. "Guess I've got a lot to unlearn." Keanu tapped his chest. "Most of us do." Then he put on his helmet and left. No dramatic exit, no mic drop. Just the quiet purr of a motorcycle disappearing into the fading California light. Later that night, Grace posted a story to her private Instagram. A close-up of the empty chapel set, golden hour light pouring through stained glass, with a caption, "Sometimes the mics hear more than the cameras ever will." Got 2 likes, one from a makeup artist, the other from Keanu Reeves. The next morning, the playback room was quiet. Not silent. There was always a faint hum from the machines, the occasional clink of a coffee cup, the rustle of paper, but quiet in a way that suggested reverence, as if the room itself had absorbed the energy of what happened the day before and was holding its breath. Grace sat behind the mixing console. her headphones resting lightly on her ears. She wasn't adjusting levels today. She wasn't trimming the usual ambient tracks. She was listening, again, to that moment. You don't earn silence by shouting, Troy. The whisper came just as Keanu leaned back on the pew, had no theatrical weight, no planned rhythm, but it struck like thunder. She paused the recording, rewound 5 seconds, played it again, still hit the same. Upstairs, the crew lounge buzzed with quiet chatter. Word had spread overnight. Not through gossip, but through tone. People weren't mocking Troy. They weren't idolizing Keanu either. They were reflecting. One of the grips, Mark, looked up from his sandwich. You hear what Keanu said to him. His friend, Alina from makeup, nodded. He didn't raise his voice. That's what got me. It was like a koan, Mark said. You know, like something a monk would say right before handing you enlightenment. Alina chuckled. Only Keanu could correct someone and make you thank him for it. By 10:30 a.m., a few interns had slipped into the sound booth to ask about levels. A thin excuse. Grace finally sighed and turned to them. You want to hear it. They froze. Can we? She played the clip. Laughter filled the space at Troy's expense. The insult, the ego. Then came the whisper. The room went still. One of the interns blinked. He didn't say it to hurt him. That's the craziest part. He said it like he meant it. Another whispered. That's not a line from the script, right? Grace shook her head. That came from him, and that changed everything. What started as quiet playback became something more. Within a few hours, someone pulled the quote and typed it out. It ended up taped above the coffee machine in the crew kitchen. Later, someone scribbled it on the whiteboard in the wardrobe trailer. You don't earn silence by shouting. Below it, KR. It wasn't about celebrity anymore. It was about presence. Troy hadn't seen any of it. He spent most of the morning in his trailer, scrolling through his phone, bouncing between passive-aggressive texts to his agent and half-baked Instagram captions. He knew something was off, the way people responded to him now. They weren't rude, just colder. He chalked it up to jealousy. Until lunch. That's when he saw it. The quote, on the whiteboard in wardrobe. He stared at it for a moment. Then, when the costume assistant walked in, he pointed at it. What's that from? He paused, surprised. Oh, it's something Keanu said during rehearsal yesterday. He blinked. During my scene. She nodded. It's kind of gone around. People really liked it. Troy narrowed his eyes. He didn't say anything else. But inside, his chest tightened. They were talking about him behind his back. And Keanu was becoming some kind of quiet legend. Troy walked out of wardrobe more carefully than he had walked in. For the first time, his steps didn't have that swing, that swagger he carried like a personal soundtrack. There was a hitch now, subtle, almost invisible, like a man walking through a fog and wondering if he's the one causing it. He pulled out his phone, opened Instagram. His most recent post, a filtered selfie captioned, "The grind never stops 100 points," had fewer likes than usual. No comments from the crew, not even from his usual circle of enablers. He tried uploading a new photo, a shot from set, him in costume holding a prop rifle, looking off into the distance with fake intensity. But when he tapped post, his finger hesitated. Then he hit backspace. By late afternoon, word of the quote reached the executive floor. Jeff Mendelsohn, one of the film's producers, stopped by Sophia Chan's directing bay. I heard there was a bit of tension on set, he said. Sophia didn't look up. There was. I heard Reeves said something. He smirked. He didn't say it. He whispered it. And it was worth more than shouting. Jeff nodded slowly. Should we be worried? No, she said. Not unless Troy decides to keep being Troy. He folded his arms. Is this gonna affect the film? Sophia finally looked up. It already is. In the best way. In the playback room, Grace's computer pinged. A file had been shared anonymously to the internal crew channel. No credits, no tags, just audio. Within hours, the quote was everywhere, whispered on walkies, scribbled on scene slates, and even printed on the back of a coffee cup sleeve from the set barista, who'd made a custom batch just for fun. Troy's face went pale when he saw it. Silence isn't weakness. It's proof you don't need noise. Not even the exact line, but close enough. Later that evening, Troy confronted the playback team. He didn't yell. He didn't throw a tantrum. He simply stood in the doorway of the sound booth and asked, "Was it you?" Grace didn't look away. "Was what me?" He pointed to the waveform on her screen. "The whisper." She tilted her head. "You mean the thing you said when you thought your mic was off? Or the thing he said when he knew it didn't matter who was listening?" Silence. Troy sighed. Did he know he was being recorded? Grace leaned back calm. "He always knows. But that's not why he says things. He says them because they're true." That night, Troy stayed late on set, lone. He sat in the chapel where the confrontation had been filmed. The lights were off. A single rig above him buzzed faintly, casting his shadow across the rows of pews. He sat there for almost 2 hours. Just it. For the first time since production began, Troy Bennett, the rising star, the headline chaser, the man with the $1 million smile, had nothing to say, and everything to think about. By the following morning, the studio had shifted. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Something invisible hung in the air, a kind of unspoken realignment. People weren't just talking about Keanu's whisper anymore. They were acting differently because of it. More deliberate, more present. Even small things. Crew members thanking each other more often, actors listening between takes, interns paying closer attention instead of texting during downtime. It was as if the whisper had reset the room. Troy showed up on time. Not early, but not late. No sunglasses, no gum, no assistant trailing behind. Just him, holding a copy of the day's scene packet in one hand, a plain black coffee in the other. He walked onto set quietly and sat alone at one of the pews. No selfies, no rehearsed charm. For 10 minutes, he read the scene in silence. Then he looked up and saw Keanu already sitting across from him, not judging, not smiling, just waiting, as if he'd been there the whole time. When Sophia arrived, she noticed something different immediately. "Blocking run?" she asked. Troy stood. "Ready." She nodded. They ran through the first sequence of lines. A subtle emotional exchange. No yelling, no action, just eye contact and implied pain. Troy held the pauses this time. He didn't force the drama. He let it breathe. Keanu's eyes softened as he responded. Something passed between them, not scripted, not directed, just human. After the take, Sophia didn't speak right away. She just smiled. Then she looked at Troy. "Found something today." He nodded. "I stopped trying to win the scene." Keanu nodded once. "That's when the scene starts winning you." The rest of the day passed quietly, but in the best way. No outbursts, no ego, just craft. Later, during a break, Troy stood at the coffee cart beside Grace. He didn't ask about the mic. He didn't complain about the crew talking. Instead, he just said, "I get it now." About the whisper. Grace raised an eyebrow. "Which part?" "That it wasn't about me." She blinked. "It was about him choosing not to become who I was trying to be." She smiled. "So, what now?" Troy looked out toward the lot. "I think I'd try again, without pretending I already know everything." In the chapel set that night, someone scribbled a new quote on the whiteboard. Not from Keanu this time, but from Troy. "Humility is louder than fame." I just couldn't hear it before. Underneath, someone wrote, "TB." No one erased it. Not that night. Not ever. The chapel was cold. Not in temperature. The studio's climate control kept everything a smooth 72 degrees. But in feeling, it was as if the wooden walls, the dusty pews, the heavy air all carried the echo of unspoken things. It was just after 6 a.m. when Troy Bennett walked in. No crew, no camera, No audience, just him, and silence. He didn't come to rehearse. Not really. He came to think. Or maybe to escape the stares, the quote on the coffee sleeve, the way the interns suddenly stopped laughing at his jokes. He had nowhere else to go. His trailer felt too small, too loud, to him, so he walked onto the set, into the chapel, and sat on the first bench. He folded his hands and rested them against his lips, elbows on knees, posture slumped. He didn't pray, but he was close. He stared at the altar for a long time. He'd never really looked at it before, not with intention, but now in the dim light, the fake wax candles looked oddly real. The stained glass shimmered with early morning studio light, casting broken rainbows across the pews. Dust floated through the beams like tiny dancers suspended in slow motion. It was peaceful and brutally honest, like the chapel could see through him. Troy leaned back and sighed. His mind raced with everything: the insult, the playback clip, the way Keanu had stared at him. Not with anger, not even with pity, but with some kind of unshakable calm, like a man who had faced fire and learned how to walk through it without screaming. Why did that bother him so much? The door creaked behind him. The step, slow even. He didn't have to turn to know who it was. "Early call?" Troy asked, his voice half sarcasm, half apology. "No call yet," Keanu replied gently. "Just habit." Troy nodded, still facing forward. Keanu walked past him, his steps soft. He stood near the altar and looked up at the stained glass. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Keanu said, "You ever notice the glass only glows when light passes through it?" Troy turned slightly. "What?" "The glass. It's beautiful, but in darkness. It's just dull colors. It needs light to mean something." Troy blinked. "Is that one of your Zen lines again?" Keanu smiled. "Maybe." Troy leaned back against the pew, arms stretched across the top like he was trying to keep himself from folding inward. "You always talk like that?" he asked. Keanu didn't answer right away. He kept looking up at the stained glass. "I don't talk like that," he finally said. "I just say what I mean." Troy scoffed. "Right." There was silence again, but not the awkward kind. The kind that invited you to be uncomfortable with yourself. Keanu stepped slowly down the altar stairs and walked into the center aisle, right where the blocking for their next scene would begin. He turned to Troy. "Walk it with me." Troy raised an eyebrow. "What now? We don't roll for hours. Let's do it once. Just the bones. No crew. No pressure." Troy hesitated, then stood. The two of them faced each other, 10 feet apart in the hollow of the chapel. The air felt heavier now. Not because of tension, because of weight, emotional weight, memory, something deeper than scripts and lights. Keanu began the scene. "You told me he died clean, but the autopsy says otherwise." Troy answered slowly. "What are you implying?" Keanu stepped closer. "That you weren't there when you said you were. That you ran." Troy looked down. "It wasn't like that," Keanu whispered. "Then tell me how it was." And then nothing. Keanu waited, not for a line, for a truth. Troy stood still. No script, no words, just breath. He let it come. "I couldn't get to him," he finally said. "He called, but I was 5 minutes too far." His voice cracked. Keanu didn't break character. He didn't smile. He nodded. "Then carry that. Don't perform it." Troy stared at him, not with defiance, with revelation. "You're not acting," he said. Keanu shrugged. "I never am." Troy stepped back. "But you are. You're always in character." Keanu nodded. "Character isn't something I become. It's someone I find." They stood there, both breathing heavier than they should have been. Then Keanu reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folded paper. He handed it to Troy. Troy opened it. It was a journal page, handwritten. Lines from the character they'd both been circling for weeks. But different. Personal, scribbled thoughts. Not from the script. Is this yours? Keanu nodded. Made it during prep. Never planned to use it. But it helped. Troy's hands trembled as he held it. It was full of grief, the loss of love, and shame. I didn't know actors did this. Keanu smirked. Most don't. That's why most are forgotten. Troy sat down again, holding the page like it might fall apart. Keanu looked down at him, then took a seat on the pew across from him. Not beside, but opposite. Equal distance. No pressure. Then he said, "The chapel isn't just a set, you know." Troy looked up. "It's a mirror," Keanu said. "It only reflects what you bring into it." And in that moment, Troy understood something for the first time in his career. He hadn't been bringing anything real, just noise. They sat in silence for several minutes, just two men breathing in the stillness of a fake chapel, on a soundstage that now felt like sacred ground. No audience, no cameras, just presence. Troy folded the journal page and tucked it carefully into his back pocket like something sacred. When he finally spoke, his voice was smaller. "I used to think this whole thing was about being seen. That's why I started acting. I wanted people to look at me and care." Keanu didn't interrupt. Troy laughed once. Bitter but honest. "But I got everything I thought I wanted. And it all feels thin, like cotton candy. You taste it, and then it's gone." Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're not wrong," he said. Troy blinked. "Wait, really?" Keanu nodded. "A lot of people chase the camera, the applause, the premiere parties. But none of that lasts. What lasts is what you leave behind in someone's gut. Not their feed." He looked over at Troy. "When people watch you, do they feel you?" Troy looked down. "Not yet." A production assistant quietly peeked in through the chapel doors, then paused when she saw the two of them sitting there. She didn't say anything, just backed away slowly. Whatever this was, she knew it wasn't to be interrupted. Keanu stood and stretched. "Come on, let's rehearse the real take. With words this time." Troy looked up surprised. "You want to run it with me? Even before the crew's here?" Keanu smiled. "No one gets better waiting for permission." They walked to their marks. No mics, no blocking, just voice and movement. And this time Troy didn't rush. He paused before his first line, felt the weight in his gut, let the shame sink in. And when he delivered it, it landed. It wasn't clean, it wasn't polished, but it was true. And Keanu didn't react as an actor. He reacted as a human being. And for the first time, it felt like two souls were speaking to each other, not two professionals delivering dialogue. When they finished, Troy blinked fast and turned away, rubbing his eyes. Keanu walked past him and gently patted his shoulder. "Don't rehearse the emotion," he said. "Rehearse the honesty. The rest will come." Then he exited the chapel. Troy remained behind, though so still. Then, with trembling hands, he sat on the altar steps. For a long time, he just stared at the glass window, watching the way the light filtered in, watching how it only came alive when he stopped trying to outshine it. He didn't speak, but if someone had been listening, they might have heard something crack, not something breaking, something opening. Word didn't just stay in the chapel. By the end of that week, it was moving across the lot like a ghost on rails, whispered between gaffers, mentioned over coffee between departments. Something was different, not just about the film, but about Troy Bennett. The man who once stormed into rehearsal with sunglasses and a smirk was now arriving 10 minutes early. The man who once posted 6 Instagram stories during lunch was now leaving his phone in the trailer. The man who once made interns cry with offhand jokes now asked them how they were doing. And somewhere between the shift changes and call sheets, people began to wonder, what the hell happened in that chapel? It started with a camera op, Davey. He'd been around the business for 20 years, kept his head down, did his job, and trusted no one but the lighting crew. He told it to the dolly grip over a smoke break. "You know what I saw?" he asked. "What?" I saw Troy wait for Keanu's cue. The grip blinked, waited, like paused. Davy nodded, didn't rush the line, didn't jump in. He listened, like an actual actor. The grip crushed his cigarette. No way. But the next day he saw it too. And the next day, a sound tech mentioned it to a producer. By Friday, a rumor had hit post-production. Keanu broke Troy Bennett without yelling once. Meanwhile, in a small editorial suite 3 lots over, an assistant editor named Ramon was reviewing B-roll to prep for the teaser trailer. He wasn't supposed to scrub through raw rehearsal footage. That was for the vault. But curiosity won. He clicked on a file labeled Scene 33. Chapel Alt Take, Private. The screen filled with soft morning light, and 2 actors moving through a scene with no marks, no blocking, just breath. He watched it twice, then exported a 10-second snippet of the most human moment. Troy pausing before his line, swallowing, and then whispering. I couldn't get to him. Ramon didn't post it publicly, but he showed it to someone, and that someone sent it to a friend. And that friend was a film blogger with 200,000 Twitter followers. Within 48 hours, a headline emerged. Is Keanu Reeves quietly mentoring Hollywood's most hated rising star? Focus. The studio starts noticing. Online buzz brews. Troy faces a mirror through others' eyes. Keanu, as always, says little but shifts everything. At first, Troy thought nothing of it. He didn't read gossip sites, didn't waste time on film blogs. Too many of them had cheered when he failed, or speculated that he only got roles through studio pressure. But then his agent called. You trending man, the voice crackled through the line. Troy was sitting alone in his trailer, halfway through a script reread. What did I do now? You didn't do anything. That's the weird part. What? The agent chuckled. It's good press this time. You're coming off humble, vulnerable, grounded. Troy furrowed his brow. I didn't give any interviews. Didn't have to. Someone leaked rehearsal footage. A 10-second raw clip. It's blowing up. Troy sat forward. Wait, what clip? The one with you and Keanu. In the chapel. That whispered line. Troy felt his throat dry up. I didn't know we were being filmed. You always are, brother. It's a studio. Even the air gets recorded. Troy hung up without finishing the call. He opened Twitter, typed his own name. Hundreds of results. Did anyone else notice Troy Bennett's eyes legit tear up in that leaked clip? I've never seen him act like that. Either he's grown up or Keanu is some kind of emotional Jedi. And another, Keanu teaching without teaching. That's sensei-level stuff. In the editing bay, Sophia Chan was watching the same clip. But she wasn't smiling. She was frowning. Next to her, Jeff Mendelsohn, the studio exec, paced. This wasn't meant to leak, he said. Sophia nodded. I know. You want me to pull it down. No, she said after a long pause. Let it breathe. He turned to her, surprised. Seriously? Sophia leaned back in her chair. We've spent a decade trying to humanize actors with fake interviews and promo tours. And here we are, getting it by accident. Or maybe not by accident. Jeff folded his arms. You think Keanu planned this? Sophia smiled. No, he just was. That's what makes it powerful. Back on set, word of the leak spread fast, but no one panicked. No lawsuits, no shutdown, no HR emails. Instead, the culture shifted. The PA who spilled coffee yesterday was comforted instead of yelled at. The camera team gave each other honest feedback without ego. One crew member even told Troy, I saw the clip. You made me cry, man. Troy couldn't respond. His throat caught. He found Keanu later that evening, seated on a folding chair near the lighting rig, sipping lukewarm tea from a paper cup. You saw the clip? Troy asked. Keanu didn't look up. I saw it. You mad? Keanu shook his head. Nothing true stays hidden forever. Troy exhaled, tension melting from his shoulders. Thank you, he said. For what? Troy looked away, foreseeing me, before I saw myself. The next day, a printed quote appeared in the makeup trailer, laminated, taped neatly above the mirror. Don't rehearse the emotion, rehearse the honesty. Keanu Reeves. Beneath it, someone had scribbled, "New on-set Bible." Makeup artists started repeating the line as they dabbed foundation and powder. Actors, even extras, began showing up with hand-annotated scripts instead of relying on line prompts. It wasn't just about work anymore, it was about truth. And people had started to ask a very un-Hollywood question. What would Keanu do? Troy sat in the studio cafe, trying to focus on his espresso, but struggling. Two young actors from another production whispered his name as they passed. He caught fragments. That's the guy. Yeah, from the chapel clip. Looks way more chill in real life. He wasn't used to that tone. Not mockery, just curiosity, and a strange kind of respect. When Sophia called him in for a brief meeting, Troy expected a warning, a scolding, maybe even a PR memo. Instead, she just played something. Not video. Audio. There was the full clip. Start to finish. No cut. No drama. Just the real moment. Troy's voice breaking. Keanu's quiet reply. Silence. Then Sophia spoke. Most actors try to perform vulnerability, she said. You didn't. You became it. Troy swallowed. I didn't know anyone was listening. That's why it worked. She leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You've got 3 weeks left on this shoot. Use them. He tilted his head. For what? She smiled. To build a legacy that doesn't vanish when the credits roll. That night, Keanu sat outside the studio in the parking lot, alone, watching the sky change color behind the skyline. Troy approached and sat beside him. They didn't speak for a long time. Then Troy said, I used to think power was volume. Keanu didn't move. And now I think it's silence that other people lean into. Keanu nodded. Then you're almost free. Troy frowned. Free? Yeah, Keanu said. From the version of you that needed to be seen to feel real. Inside the chapel set, the lights flickered gently. No crew, no cameras, but something had shifted, and it wasn't going back. The air inside the chapel set was unusually still, not the silence of emptiness, but of reverence. Like the space itself knew what was about to happen. It was week 4 of production, and the crew was preparing for the most emotionally demanding sequence in the film. The confession scene, the point in the story where everything comes undone, the guilt, the loss, the betrayal. A 2-person monologue shot in a single take. No music, no cuts, just raw presence. Director Sophia Chan had written it herself. A scene so personal it made her hands shake when she typed it years ago. She had always imagined she'd have to guide it moment by moment, line by line, frame by frame. But that morning she was standing off to the side, watching, because Keanu Reeves was in control now. The rehearsal began without a clapboard or a director's call. Keanu simply stepped into the chapel and stood under the stained glass window. He didn't ask for blocking. He didn't ask for lighting. He asked for everyone to clear the space. Even Sophia. All I need is one lens, he said. Which one? Asked the DP. The honest one. Sophia crossed her arms, watching from behind a blackout curtain. She had no headset on, no monitor, just her eyes. Troy Bennett stood to the right of the altar, clutching a folded script. His hands were shaking slightly. Keanu glanced at him. You ready? He asked. Troy nodded slowly. I think so. Keanu stepped forward, placed one hand gently on Troy's shoulder and whispered, Then forget the lines. Troy blinked. What? Forget the script. Speak from the ache. The cameras rolled. No cue, no announcement. Keanu just began. His voice came low and uneven, like a man carrying too many truths in his lungs. He trusted you, even when he shouldn't have, and now you carry that. You carry him. Troy swallowed. His response wasn't a line. It wasn't even acting. It was a confession. I didn't want to survive it, but I did. And now I don't know what to do with the part of me that's still breathing. His voice cracked. Tears welled up. Keanu didn't move. He received the words like a prayer. The crew held their breath. You could hear it, the absence of sound, the sacred vacuum. Even the boom mic trembled slightly from the operator's hands. The monologue built slowly, a dance of regret and restraint. No theatrics, just pain laid bare. Then Keanu took one step closer, just one, and said, "Then live for him, not out of guilt, but out of love." Troy collapsed to his knees, not by direction, by gravity. Sophia watched from the shadows, tears in her eyes. She had blocked this scene 27 times on paper. She had envisioned wide shots, dolly moves, emotional scores. But this wasn't direction. This was surrender. She slowly stepped back, removed her director's headset, and hung it gently on the hook by the curtain. And in that moment, she did something rare for Hollywood. She gave the scene away, to trust, to truth, to Keanu. The take ended without anyone saying, "Cut." Keanu stepped forward, lifted Troy gently by the arm and whispered, "You did it." Troy nodded, face wet. "I didn't know I could." Keanu smiled. "You didn't need to know. You just needed to feel." The chapel doors opened. Sophia entered. The entire crew turned to look at her, waiting for approval, for notes, for perfection. She said nothing, just walked forward and hugged Keanu, then turned to Troy and hugged him too. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "That's the film." That night, Sophia wrote a note. She left it taped to the call sheet. No signature, just words. Direction isn't control. It's knowing when to move out of the way. What you saw today wasn't acting. It was remembering. Troy sat alone in the chapel long after everyone left. The candles had burned low. The dust had settled. He walked to the stained glass window and touched it. For the first time, he saw himself reflected in the color, not the actor, the man. And it didn't scare him. The storm didn't come from the studio, came from a whisper. By the end of the 5th week of filming, what had started as a quiet transformation on set had turned into a digital wave. First it was one tweet, then 3 blogs, then a fan page, then Variety. Headline: The Redemption of Troy Bennett. Insiders say Keanu Reeves is behind it. Subheading: What happens when Hollywood's most arrogant rising star ends up in the same film as its quietest saint? The article didn't quote crew names, but it didn't need to. People were talking and the story had legs. Photos surfaced. Troy walking behind Keanu on set instead of ahead of him. A blurry shot of Troy holding open a door for a grip. A leaked clip where Troy, mid-scene, dropped the script pages and kept going. None of it was scandal, but all of it was different. The press hadn't seen humility from Troy before, and that made it sell. Inside the studio PR office, the executives panicked, not because of anything bad, because it wasn't controlled. Jeff Mendelsohn stood at the center of a glass conference room, pacing while holding his phone. "We need to own this narrative." Sophia sat across from him, unmoved. "Why?" He stopped. "Because right now, the internet's writing the story for us." She looked up. "Good. Let them." Back on set, Troy sat in his trailer, scrolling the headlines. One caught his eye. Reeves the mentor, Bennett the student. The industry might finally have its next leading man. He read the article 3 times. And it wasn't mocking him. It was admiring him, not for flash, not for scandals, but for growth, for change. His publicist called. "You've got a PR window. This is rare. Do one sit-down interview. We control the story." He hesitated. "Can I talk to Keanu first?" The publicist choked on her coffee. "Keanu doesn't do interviews." "Exactly," he said, and he hung up. He found Keanu near the soundstage, crouched down helping a prop assistant fix a broken grip on a lantern. Troy waited until the moment passed, then asked, "You see the press?" Keanu nodded. "I don't read it, but I hear things. They want me to do a piece. Tell the story." Keanu tilted his head. "What story?" Troy hesitated. "The one where I changed." Keanu stood up, wiped dust off his hands. "If it's true, you don't need to say it." Troy furrowed his brow. "But everyone else is saying it." Keanu shrugged. "Then it's working." Troy kicked at the floor. "What if they stop believing it?" Keanu paused. "Then keep being it." The answer was maddening in its simplicity. Troy wanted control. He wanted to sculpt his image now that it was becoming beautiful. But Keanu just was. No agenda, no headline, just himself. And that scared Troy more than the press ever had. That afternoon, a reporter showed up on set without clearance. Word spread fast. She waited outside the lot entrance in a black SUV with tinted windows, holding a camera crew and a mic flagged with a streaming service logo. Troy saw it from the makeup trailer window. He stared at the door for a long time. Then he stood up, walked past everyone, and stepped outside. He didn't speak to the press. He walked past them, right to the fans standing behind barricades across the street, the ones watching every day, some for a glimpse of Keanu, some for the spectacle. He smiled, took a few selfies. Then, when one young woman said, "I didn't expect you to be this cool in person," he replied, "Neither did I." Inside the SUV, the reporter rolled her eyes. "Too quiet," she said. "No story." The driver pulled away. Back in the chapel set, Keanu stood at the altar again, running lines with an extra. A woman with 2 lines and no screen credit. Troy entered slowly. Look, didn't interrupt. And for the first time, he understood. Power doesn't shout, it listens. Last, he took a deep breath and chose not to give the interview. The email landed in Sophia Chan's inbox at 6:04 a.m. Subject: Action required. Revised ending. Studio notes. Attached. A 3-page PDF. Beneath that, a text from Jeff Mendelson. Need you to get Troy and Keanu on board. Call me. Sophia opened the attachment and read it twice. She didn't sigh. She didn't scream. She just closed her laptop, then walked out of her trailer. By 9 a.m., the production office buzzed like a disturbed hive. Word had spread. The studio wanted to reshoot the ending, not because it wasn't good, but because it wasn't marketable. In the original final scene, Keanu's character died. Quietly, anonymously, after reconciling with Troy's. No heroic music, no epic farewell, just a flicker of forgiveness and silence. The studio, however, wanted more, a bigger send-off, a dramatic twist. Troy saving Keanu in a final blaze of glory, because they wanted Troy to be the hero. Troy sat in a glass-walled conference room with 2 producers, a legal rep, and a marketing exec in a blazer that cost more than most used cars. He listened without speaking. They pitched the new ending like it was a gift. You step in, drag him from the fire, one-arm carry, and the final shot is you walking into daylight. Troy tilted his head. No shot of Keanu, just a voiceover, and maybe a hand gesture. But you carry the screen. Troy looked down at the script. Every word felt hollow. "Where's Sophia?" he asked. "She's meeting with Keanu," the producer said. That was a lie. Sophia was standing quietly in the hallway, watching, listening. Not because she didn't trust Troy, but because she needed to know who he really was. Across the lot, Keanu sat on the edge of the chapel pew, script in his lap, flipping through pages without reading them. He already knew what the new ending meant, not for the film, for the people making it. Sophia entered. He looked up. "They want a blockbuster," she said. He nodded. "They want Troy to be the savior." He nodded again. Sophia sat beside him. "Are you going to fight it?" "No." She blinked. "Why not?" "Because I'm not the one they'll listen to." She studied him. He wasn't being passive. He was being deliberate. It has to be him, Keanu said. Back in the conference room, Troy looked up. This is the kind of ending people expect, right? Exactly, the exec said, smiling wide. It tests better, sells better. Troy folded the pages once, then gently set them down. I used to need that kind of ending. Everyone froze. But now, I think I'd rather finish something honest than sell something loud. The room fell silent. One of the producers leaned forward. You sure about that? Troy stood. You wanted growth. This is it. He walked out. Outside, Sophia waited with Keanu. They didn't speak. Troy walked straight up to them and handed the folded script to Sophia. Tell them no, he said. Then looked at Keanu. Let's do it your way. Keanu didn't smile. He simply placed a hand on Troy's shoulder and nodded. The crew gathered later that day for the final rehearsal of the original ending. Keanu lay motionless on the floor of the set. Troy stood over him, whispering the final lines. You don't owe me anything, but I'll carry this forward for both of us. No music, no score, just raw breath and blinking tears. When the scene ended, no one clapped. They didn't need to. Sophia walked to the center of the set. You just made something that might not sell the most tickets, she said. But it'll outlive the ones that do. In a quiet hallway later that night, Jeff Mendelsohn confronted her. You had one chance to make this global. Sophia smiled. I did. That week, Troy posted a single sentence on his Instagram story. White background, no photo, just text. Sometimes the right ending isn't the biggest. It's just the truest. No hashtags, no taglines. But when he checked the comments, the first like, Keanu Reeves, the call sheet simply said, Scene 45, final shot. Chapel Day. There was no fanfare, no catered breakfast buffet, no studio execs crowding in to watch the magic unfold. Just one chapel, two actors, one scene, and something far heavier than any camera could capture. Keanu Reeves arrived at 5 a.m. sharp. He didn't speak, didn't rehearse, didn't even walk to the green room. He just sat in the pew closest to the stained glass window, looking at the light bleeding through the reds and golds. Troy arrived soon after. No trailer visit, no makeup, just wardrobe and water. He nodded to Keanu. Keanu nodded back. No words, not today. Sophia Chan walked onto set without a headset. She didn't need one. She stood behind the lens herself. Camera locked on a slow dolly. Only one move. Only one take. The shot would start with Troy's face, broken, then pull slowly back to reveal Keanu's body, lifeless, slumped against the altar, bloodless, clean, peaceful, no music, no movement, just breath and stillness. The lights dimmed, the stage hushed. Roll sound, whispered the AD. Speed, camera, rolling. Sophia didn't say action. She didn't need to. Troy stood in place, knees shaking. He looked down at Keanu, not as a scene partner, as a man who changed him, quietly, permanently. He opened his mouth, but didn't speak. Instead, he knelt and whispered, so faint it barely registered, "Thank you." He stayed there, kneeling, not delivering a monologue, just existing. For 30 full seconds, is wet, breath shallow, heart visible. Then the dolly moved. The chapel widened, and the silence grew louder. Cut, Sophia whispered. Nobody moved. Nobody clapped. The scene didn't end. Settled, like dust, like memory, like truth. Keanu slowly opened his eyes, sat up. He looked at Troy, smiled small knowing, then stood, walked past Sophia, past the lights, past the cameras. He removed his mic, set it gently on the cart, and kept walking. No goodbyes, no wrap party speech, no final selfie. He just left, helmet in hand, jacket slung over shoulder, boots echoing on the studio concrete. Troy watched him from the chapel doorway. No one tried to stop him. You don't stop the tide when it recedes. You just watch it go. That night, Sophia gathered the crew. No big speeches, just a candle placed at the altar. She spoke softly. This film was never about war, or death, or heroes. She looked around. It was about silence, and what lives inside it. Troy sat in his trailer long after everyone had left. He scrolled to a blank screen on his phone. No words came, just an image in his mind. Keanu, walking away, and leaving something behind without ever asking for credit. The next morning, Troy came to set, though nothing was scheduled. The chapel was being dismantled, workers pulling down the walls, rolling up the stained glass, stripping the soul from the space. Troy picked up a shard of colored glass from the floor, kept it in his hand, and whispered, "I won't forget." Keanu never posted about the film, never mentioned it in press. He just let it exist, like a gift, unwrapped in silence. It was 6 months after the final shot. The chapel was long gone, the crew scattered to new projects. Troy Bennett had finished 2 more films. Keanu Reeves disappeared as he always did. And then the movie dropped. Title Hallowed Ground. Runtime 114 minutes. Budget modest. Expectations even lower. But what happened next? No one predicted. The first reviews came from small critics. Words like quietly devastating, unshakable, and the performance of a lifetime showed up again and again, but not for Troy. For both of them, people wrote entire think pieces on why Keanu didn't speak in the final scene. They quoted his stillness, the way he looked at Troy like he was handing over the future, the way he died without asking to be mourned, and then always the whisper, "You don't earn silence by shouting." That one line spread Reddit threads, college essays, tattoo inspiration boards. It became a kind of modern proverb, and no one could remember exactly where they first heard it, only that it came from him at the Toronto Film Festival. Hallowed Ground screened without a single studio exec present, but by the final shot, every seat was silent. The audience didn't clap, didn't cheer. They stood, not for drama, for reverence. Troy walked out the back, avoiding cameras. An older woman followed him, gently touched his arm. "I haven't spoken to my brother in 10 years, she said. "Until tonight." He blinked. She nodded. "Thank you." Later, a journalist asked Troy during a roundtable, why didn't Keanu promote the film? Troy paused, then smiled. He already did, just not with interviews. The host leaned in. "What's the one thing he said that stuck with you?" Troy looked at the lens for a long time, then said, "He said silence only means something when you've earned it." That wrecked me. Backstage, a former grip from the set watched the clip on her phone, then texted the director. "He's carrying the film like Keanu carried him." In a classroom at NYU, a professor teaching film structure ended a lecture by playing the final scene. She let it run in full, no commentary. Then she looked at the students. Who taught him how to act like that? One student said, "Keanu Reeves." Another said, "No, Keanu taught him how to listen." And far away, off-grid, somewhere quiet, surrounded by trees and motorcycles and vinyl records, Keanu watched none of it. He didn't need to. But in his living room, taped on the fridge, was a wrinkled piece of paper. A note written by Troy, handwritten. Only 3 words. "I heard you."